What is up, guys? It's your boy Aniki here. We're discussing the latest chapter of My Hero Academia. Sorry that this is a day late, but I've been, dealing with some things lately. But we're gonna dive right back into this because here's the thing. It's kind of weird because I feel like this one is gonna end up being shorter, even though some people might expect it to be longer. But the issue for me is that there's a lot of things that we've kind of discussed on this channel. Oh, okay, fine. I've said, you guys have listened to, commented on, whatever, that this kind of just ratified, right? Like this chapter kind of really just sets in stone certain things and establishes them as like, this is what we talked about potentially happening, this is what's actually happening, this is the ramifications of this, because like a lot of this is what I said would happen based on the context of the environment, the struggle, and what was happening between these two groups. That being said, I'm still going to talk about them in specifics just to go over and like maybe run back through some of the older things I might have said about them in the past or why this is this way, etc. But it starts off with us getting the revelation that we do, in fact, 1 week later we get the revelation that they've doctored, edited the video so that it looks like random villains attacked the town. This actually makes a lot of sense, especially technologically speaking. A lot of people are familiar with the technology of the green screen. In the same way, what they more than likely would have done is just simply edited footage of Twice and his doppelgangers to make sure that using those and editing those out as the pattern, that so the green screen effectively would be Twice. With the fact that there were so many of him, it's the logical choice, and in addition to that, it gave them multiple angles and opportunities for showing different abilities that they can edit into there, or different quirks. In addition to that, like modifying all their costumes so they could be different people, whatever they needed. By having so many Twice around, you can just constantly flip up the angle and turn the Twices into different people and make them attack different areas. And as long as you're cutting out the final results of those individual clashes, you have infinite usage of his people to kind of like edit it around and make it look like there was specifically 20 different people that were there, just using different Twice clones, editing it, making it look like certain attacks that maybe some of the other people in the army would have launched came from them. Now, one of the things that's important though is that one of the things that I had said was that no matter what happened with this, the Meta Liberation Armies and the League of Villains agenda is pushed. No matter who won, the Meta Liberation Army cause advanced, so them losing this fight technically wasn't an issue because their overall long-term goals would be benefited no matter who won by this arc. And then that comes to pass. We see that they do manage to market it as the Deca citizens standing up for themselves and stopping the event, though they did have severe casualties. And it says in this Viz translation that many, not just the Liberation Army, not just heroes, but many people within the context of society are lauding it as a good thing, as a, like that everyman tale that they really wanted to go for. What they don't know is that this Meta Liberation Army that they might be getting recruited into in the future, or the Paranormal Liberation Front now, is no longer just about the Quirk Liberation, and now it's, Shigaraki and them. People don't know that, and people won't find that out until they get much further into the organization, more than likely, especially with the fact that we have let's just get through, because I also want to discuss the fact that we did get the sushi scene. Yes, I said that correctly. Which is something that we kind of joked about, but like it covers certain other things that I think are really important, such as Twice not being mentally cured. He is like, I kind of thought he was going to move into a more consistent. Instead, instead of being Twice now, though, he seems to have like 4 personalities rattling around in his head that are all going at war with each other, which I think is also a good touch, because Horikoshi has usually been pretty consistent about the way psychological issues actually work, or the way healing from them works. And so the temporary adrenaline-based, him being focused, able to stay whole thing made sense. But the reality is that he still spent all that time and made all those clones and saw, once again, himself get murdered thousands upon thousands of times. So I think seeing himself get killed a bunch of times, again, probably, it makes sense. The trauma refreshed, it just wasn't him doing it to himself this time. That's the only thing that really saved it. But the reality is that seeing himself murder himself was bad, but imagine seeing yourself impaled through with multiple ice shards, vehicles stabbed, shot, lit on fire. He saw himself die a lot of different ways, so... And there's actually something about Twice's quirk that I'm starting to be speculative of, that I think his mental stability has caused him not to notice. but I will touch on that in a video dedicated to Twice. Um, so we get more of the Avengers hanging out as they're eating sushi, and like we see Dobby and Compress kind of like riffing off of each other, which I think is important to note, like which characters are starting to be paired off of each other more. And Dobby and Compress spent a lot of time together. Toga and Twice are the other pair, and then you have Spinner and Shigaraki, who seem to focus around each other a lot, with Spinner kind of being like his blade. Um, we see that the Liberation Army, the old MLA members, and the League of Villains are still a bit at odds, but really it seems to be that Twice and Skeptic are at odds, and the other ones are able to kind of set it all aside, because at the end of the day, they're getting the food, they're getting the money, they're getting the clothing, they're getting what they need, so it's not as big of a deal. Also, Toga did make it a point to specifically get a replacement for that coat that Curious cost her, which I think is a nice little touch, but it also it's interesting to note that it seems to be that they focus mostly on their medical bills. They fed them and they made sure everything was fine, but the League of Villains hasn't been bothering them too much. I think they don't want to like over, test the boundaries of this relationship yet. We'll see where that goes from there. But Hanabata seems to be the faithful pastor and steward, whereas Skeptic, which is within his name, Skeptic is supposed to be the one that's a little more cynical, a little more down, the one who follows the ideals of liberation, but maybe is more skeptical about like Destro and Redestro and that whole situation, especially coming through here where he seems very frustrated overall at the way things are going. Whereas Trumpet, who just simply declares, is just trying to keep things going, keeping things neutral, very much a neutral existence within the organization, very much just dedicated towards following Destro. We see that we've got a more sophisticated version of Overhaul's hideout, leading into just this crazy like mausoleum, where there's just all the spaces, all these pillars. You can tell they've got like 1,000 people down there. It's just like a full-blown amphitheater. And Redestro is going in. Horikoshi's in his bag artistically again, doing what he does. One of the things that I will say is that I think a lot of people misunderstood Redestro, and I think a lot of you thought he was supposed to be like a more focused around like a kind of stressed out guy that was like this suave businessman. No, he's an eccentric. He's a zealot, and because of this zeal, one of the things that if you think back, like every time he had to express like serious emotions, like Horikoshi always like dramatized them heavily. If you think back to when he was upset with Miyashita, he has the whole process of smiling and then like looking down. He just puts his hands on his head. It's like the guy is like a very dramatic figure, and even like the way like walking around as you sip your wine with these grandiose views, all these things were done to show you that he's an eccentric, grandiose person who expresses things and has these feelings to a huge scale. But you have to realize that because his quirk stockpiles stress, he doesn't express those feelings, and by repressing himself, he was constantly building up. And so it's kind of like what we're seeing here is Redestro completely unhinged. He's no longer holding in those emotions. He's no longer trying to deal with the stresses of being repressed, living up to the expectations of his family or any of these other things. Instead, he's like, I'm not stockpiling my stress, because that's not what my emotions, because a liberated person doesn't hold on to their feelings, just let them out. They declare them, they explode with them. And so he's just kind of mimicking Shigaraki to a certain degree, and that he's just letting it all hang out. But you have to realize that this was like a religious, deep-seating. The reality is that Redestro is like 45, 50 years old. He has been taught to focus on liberation since he was a child. This is 40 to 50 years of indoctrination. This is 40 to 50 years like trying to get this guy to believe that liberation, following your quirk, embodying it to its fullest, this is what it means to be a proper person in the quirk-based society. This is what it takes. This is what it means to be, liberated. And the fact that he has to like confine himself to being a CEO, the fact that he had to do all these things, the way he had to live was never within itself liberation. But what he said during his fight with Shigaraki is my power, which means my CEO-ness, the fact that I'm a CEO, my position in the Liberation Army, my stress quirk, the abilities that come with that itself, all of these things are a means to the end of liberation. So what you have to understand is every cool moment, everything you see about Redestro is what he believes is the correct choice of action towards a liberated society. So it's not so much that he's fake when we first meet him, so much as he is everything he thinks he needs to be for liberation. And what you think as a reader and what within the context of the story and his own personal experiences and what we're seeing unfold aren't necessarily going to be the same things for what we see as necessary for liberation. Some of us don't even want Redestro under his thumb, though I will ask you, what was your alternative? Like him beating Shigaraki, but somehow not killing Shigaraki, even though he wanted to kill Shigaraki, so you want the Doctor to take mercy and break character, and save him, which means all the stakes of the arc are undone because they're still getting the support of the Doctor without taming Makia or beating the Metal Liberation Army. Yeah, that's what it takes for Redestro to live. Completely undoing the stakes of the arc. So, do you want him to be Shigaraki's underling, or do you want to completely ruin the arc and undo the stakes? Or do you want him to die? Like, that's kind of... I don't think a lot of people really fully thought through, like, the consequences of making sure the Metal Liberation Army could have stayed exactly how they were while preserving the League of Villains, while also not letting them get Gigantomachia or him somehow taking pity on them, which is not how you want your villain to come into their own. You do not want Shigaraki to become a villain through pity of the Metal Liberation Army. You do not want Shigaraki to become the major villain because Gigantomachia was like, oh, he got attacked by an army. I guess that means master successors legit. No, you need him to prove that he's scary like All For One. That's what you needed. That's what you were supposed to have. Because the reality is that some of you didn't even think of Shigaraki as the main villain until this arc. And I know a lot of you aren't going to own it, but there's a lot of people out there that were like, nah, Shigaraki, All For One's the main villain. All For One's the main villain. You guys were convinced that like that's part of why Shigaraki and the jailbreak theories is going to happen. Even though I still think Shigaraki will do the jailbreak, I don't think he's going to be breaking him out of prison so that All For One can be the final boss, which is something that a lot of people have been thinking. Because one of the things that Horikoshi has kind of driven home by now within the context of this series is that All Might does not know everything. All Might had no idea about Shigaraki. He didn't know about any of that. So when All Might told Izuku, yeah, you're gonna have to take down All For One, it's based on his data from 5 years before he met Deku. Think about that. Shigaraki is 5 years older than Deku. Just off top, like that's how All For One actually did a really good job hiding Shigaraki and like that kinds of stuff from All Might's like gaze. But you need to realize that there's a lot of stuff at work here that I think a lot of people misconstrued, and that's why they were confused. So this arc and him like completely bitching someone that's like supposed to be like up here on the verse because he's got some of the highest destructive feats, and we actually never saw Redestro at 100% power. You need to understand that. He said this is 100% stress, or it should be, because his stress levels were actually dropping, which is why like when he put the claustro on, he started to turn back black. But by the time Shigaraki starts snapping when he has to get out of claustro, when you think about how dangerous that situation was, there's a reason why, even with everything that was happening, even with this fucking robot armor that puts him over the top being destroyed, with the city melting around him, he still couldn't stay in like stress mode and just Hulk jump away. And it was because he was seeing his ideals played out. So I just think a lot of people need to really focus more in on what Redestro's ideology was and the ramifications of that versus what they like, the rawness and swag they thought he was going to be, because he is still those things. Like when he has to go into his work meeting without his legs in his wheelchair, he's still going to be Mr. Suave. I guarantee you, if we get to see like Redestro making moves in the corporate circle, he's still gonna look like that dude. There's gonna be a moment where he probably gets some dudes in a room and he tells them like, yo, your company's with us now though. And that's gonna be interesting when you see Redestro go to do a takeover, and then all of a sudden you gotta deal with the fact you got Shigaraki in the room and he's trying to tell you, hold on, I need my beverage. Without question, your company is theirs, and you can either deal with it or you can die and still have to give your company over because the next person's gonna, hand it over. So finally, the League of Villains name is dead. I'm okay with that. I'm still probably gonna end up calling them the League of Villains. Mostly because referring to the League of Villains allows us to focus in on like the 6, whereas the Paranormal Liberation Front is the entire unit. And the reality is that when we speak of these groups and factions, or when we talk about like how this schism might play out, notice there's a white panel separating, the original League of Villains from the original Metal Liberation Army in the original spread for when we get the name. So I think Horikoshi himself made it a point to emphasize that divide, so we should, be aware of it too. Staple Pants Dobby. Everybody's joking about that. But one of the things that I like that was talked about is that there is one last hand. There is one last hand that he still managed to keep, which one for aesthetics, I'm glad that's still there. He is a sauce boss now, the symbol of threads. Honestly, I'm glad. I just need the color scheme on this because I'm probably gonna go with Shigaraki this upcoming year for my and my yearly anime convention run. Wasn't playing. I needed a beverage. So, uh, and the thing that I really like here though is that we get Shigaraki, who I keep calling the King of the Pirates, but I should more of a compare him to Blackbeard actually, because this is him with his 9 captains, and he's going to have a 10th Titanic captain, which I personally view as Hawks, in the sense that you have the number 2 hero, you have somebody who you know is an extremely high tier fighter, you pull Hawks, you make him the face, you essentially put Hawks in charge of the heroes division, and now Hawks is essentially the Blackbeard, not the Blackbeard, sorry, the Kuzan, or the Aokiji of My Hero Academia, while also being like Itachi. And that, my friends, is how you do a shout out within the context of a series. These are the guys focused on being the freest people, and I kind of think it's fascinating that you can draw these parallels even to older series if you want to. And then because nobody makes that like cool, like the One Piece type of comparison. Nobody's like, oh, what are the ways in which these two stack up and like have similarities as a narrative. So I figured I'd actually like go ahead and tackle that one. But also because every anime organization has a boss, and then he's got 9 or 10 people that are just like under him. It's also like the Espada from Bleach. But except I would also like to point out that the twist here of Hawks being pulled in would be fascinating, because he wouldn't be able to betray the League to heroes that he was talking to in the context of the Liberation Army, but he would also have to find a way to like rat out those heroes. And just the position Hawks is in right now is fascinating as hell, and I'm very much looking forward to whether or not there ends up being some other smaller heroes that are in the Meta Liberation Army or the Paranormal Liberation Front that see Hawks and make sure that he doesn't see them. But Hawks is the guy that does the spying. We also get to see something very important, as Genus might be gone, and if Genus Pieces is the way we have gone, then I approve, because I mean, it'd be a little tragic for Genus as a character to have everything that he's done be directly tied to him not quite being good enough, where he wasn't able to influence Bakugo, he totally didn't. He was good enough to save everyone, but not good enough to actually get away from All for One or to beat him. Like, now he basically might have like, I think that if Genus is dead, if that's actually Genus, I believe that we're gonna get a flashback where Hawks and Genus talk about it, and Genus agrees to die, and Hawks chops him up and puts him in the body bag. But I do think that that would be like an interesting like boon on Genus as a character, but I think a lot of people would take that as a detriment to Hawks. I think Hawks is getting his own video, because I think that people appreciate Hawks because of the rawness, the swag, the danger of like what he is, but I think a lot of people aren't focused on what he represents within the context of the narrative. So that's something that I'm looking forward to now. My boy Shisui is gonna hear that part and be like, oh, a Hawks video, and then he's gonna hook me up with a thumbnail. So a lot of people, man. So as we get towards the end of the chapter, and we get to see the traditional, as Caleb Cook put it, this is like a traditional Japanese thing where like that's how they depict people who are like sniveling. Like I said, he's everything to the max. This is all checking the boxes. This is stuff that, if you viewed him as an eccentric, and if you paid attention to the paneling and the like fisheye lens and all these other things that were done to constantly emphasize how dramatic he is, I think this is a bit easier to swallow and makes a bit more sense within the context of the series, especially when you also apply like the religious zeal to it. But if you weren't looking at him that way, then I definitely can see how this is completely hitting you in a weird spot and you're not exactly sure how you feel about it. But we get something important, which is us going all the way back to what started the entire arc. We get confirmation that Shigaraki is going to get power, more power, which we are like, here's the thing. His attack did not level all of Deka, but like this city is pretty level, so he's already kind of flirting with city level. At this point, whatever amps he can get definitely will push him to city level. But the upside is that because of the fact that the League of Villains, this is something that I think Horikoshi did specifically to keep the battle sides balanced. The villains not having a healer has actually been one of the main things keeping them from constantly doing something. Whereas the heroes have all these, like they have Recovery Girl and all these other things, it's been consistently emphasized throughout the series that they don't have a healer in their party. And so whenever Shigaraki and them get injured, even if they can get like some of the basic stuff taken care of, they ultimately don't get to bounce back within like 2 or 3 days, the same way that Aizawa got to bounce back and teach after the USJ incident within like 2 or 3 days, or Deku can break his arms, go watch the rest of the sports festival and not even miss the final like couple matches of the tournament. So yeah, the league is definitely going to be benched for a while. They've got some serious injuries, lost some limbs, or like we got broken arms on twice, so that's at least a month. We got like the amount of blood loss or like internal damage that Toga took. We don't know if she lost that eye for sure yet, but we got her in an eye patch. I'm sure Dabi is going to want to recover, even though he looked like he was fine, but still like roasting yourself pretty heavily. So yeah, we got a lot of injuries that people are going to need to like really bounce back from. Even Redestro, who looked kind of angry actually when the lieutenants were announced, but it's hard to tell because usually when he's angry you see the ink blots instead of just like darkness over his eyes. So he might also just be biding his time while he's injured. There's multiple ways in which this can be going. Shigaraki's leg being messed up, like all around, like we've got some time before the villain's next big move should be, but there's still all the pieces on the board now for them to make them, and that's what matters. I think I'm gonna try to leave the video here because a lot of the things I want to dive in depth on are all like individual character psyches that could end up taking way longer than necessary for this chapter deconstruction, and I can keep this one shorter that way. But also, if I'm going to do videos on a lot of these characters anyway, then I might as well just save it for those, so that way you have something to look forward to, but also so that you don't get a snippet of something instead of just the full context. I hope you guys are having a good day. I've got multiple videos planned, and depending on, I'm also supposed to be looking for an apartment and moving within the next month or two, so I've got a lot of little things I'm supposed to be knocking out. So I'm trying to, get back on that steady, consistent grind, but between like trying to get in the gym, I even skipped that today to make sure I got this video out today instead of waiting until tomorrow or something. But yeah, just trying to make sure I get all these things wrapped up in my personal life, and then so that way I can focus on doing this more. But I'm trying to make sure I at least give you guys consistent chapter deconstructions. Hope you guys are all having a plus ultra day. You guys have a wonderful time. Aniki out.